But it's good to see everyone. Look at the people around you, right? The few, the proud, the healthy, right? Yeah, hopefully we keep that healthiness going. There are some people in the church, though, that are sick. Mildred LaCroix asked for prayer this morning. She's feeling ill, as well as I heard we have another lady in our church, Ruth, who has RSV. She's in the hospital, so we ask that you would be praying for them, as well as others you may know who are sick. I love the song set this morning. Just gratitude towards God for what He's done, humility, Him being our hope, the one we can call on, the one we can put our faith in, our trust in. Some encouraging things just to share with you. Today, one of our church plants that we've been investing in throughout the last 3 years celebrated their third birthday. So that's some really exciting news for Illuminate Church. We also have another church plant that we have supported for quite some time, and they are now in a place where they're looking for a permanent home, and so that is really exciting too. They've been doing the whole setup and tear down thing for a long period of time, and they're at that place now where they feel like we're ready to settle in. And so you can be praying about that. That's Parkside Church. They're just a tremendous group of people. And, God has just been so good, so faithful. We've got to celebrate what He is doing and who He is. There's so much just to be thankful for. I think about our Hispanic ministry. A year ago we were talking about starting this up, and the goal was with Pastor Felipe Pilar, reaching 20 people, having 20 people gather. And a couple weeks ago, I think you've heard me mention it before, there was 15 at our Christmas Eve gathering, our Christmas Eve gathering, and there could have been more. There were more people who regularly come that just weren't able to show up that night in particular. So I feel like we're pretty close, if not hitting that mark. I know we're hitting it as we gather in homes throughout the week, but our regular gathering is approaching that cusp of 20 people. The goal this next year is 20 more, so a total of 40. So, continue to pray for Pastor Felipe, Pastor Pilar as they begin this Hispanic work out of welcome. Just great things that are going on. And, it's kind of fitting because we're launching into this series called Unsung Heroes. And, there are certain iconic figures throughout history that when the music plays, when songs are sung, when words are spoken, immediately they're recognized by almost everyone. Right? For example, if I were to say, and I'm going to need your help this morning, right? If I were to say, hey, it's a bird, it's a plane, you would say, it's Superman, or underdog, right? It's Superman, it's underdog, right? Type thing. Or if I were to go, no, Batman, yeah, good job. Give yourselves a hand. That's amazing. Well done. Well done. Okay, this one's a little tougher, maybe not as familiar, but do-do-do, 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 do-do-do. But yeah, thank you. I was afraid I was going to have to keep singing, so thank you for putting me out of my misery there. But yeah, you would recognize those iconic individuals, and yet alongside those iconic heroes are characters or individuals who play significant roles in their lives, in their communities, that they don't get a theme song, right? They don't get a costume. People don't know their name or even recognize them. Sometimes they get left out of the story completely as time progresses. I mean, honestly, how many of us remember Jimmy, the photographer from Superman? Like some of the more recent series, there is no Jimmy. Right? He gets left out completely. And yet he's alongside Superman or Clark Kent and Lois and taking pictures and reporting news and kind of helping them take care of the bad guys as well. And yet he's left out of the headlines. Right? Or think about Jim Gordon. Right? He's the one with the bat signal. Like everybody remembers Batman. Everybody remembers Robin, and there's some other sidekicks and those kinds of things in there. But Jim Gordon, some of the stuff Batman doesn't even know about. And it's Jim who puts that giant light in the sky with the symbol that calls Batman and says, hey, we got this going on. Can you do something about it? The Joker's at it again. The Penguin, the Catwoman, type thing. It's Jim's faithfulness and diligence that really helps direct Batman where he needs to go and what he needs to be doing, and helping justice be accomplished and putting bad guys in jail. He's often forgotten about in the storylines. And then, of course, you got Spider-Man, whose moral compass doesn't come from another superhero mentor, but from the steady internal voice of his Uncle Ben, who cautioned him, with great power comes great responsibility. And then he's got all these support roles from people like Mary Jane and sweet Aunt May, and in more recent years, his best friend Ned. And these are the people who don't get the suits. They don't get the theme songs. They don't get the flash and the bang and the headlines. But in their faithful service and commitment to work hard and help others in everyday life, they play an incredibly valuable role in the outcomes of their stories. Right? Let me pull my air quotes out. They're unsung heroes. That they're everyday, ordinary people. It's a term that comes from the idea that they don't go down in the songs about history. A lot of times, history was captured in songs, and that was a way for people to remember. We encounter that in the Bible. There's different people that have songs that are written in the Bible, right, as a way to remember their history. These are the individuals who don't have songs about them, and yet they had everything to do with the outcome of the situation turning out well. They aren't written about. They aren't mentioned. They are often overlooked. And again, this isn't just in the comic books. This isn't just in the real world. This is in the Bible, which, is the real world, right? It's in the Bible as well. How many Bible stories have you encountered, or how many Bible songs, for that matter, do you know about Miriam? You know any songs about Miriam? Or Jonathan? You know any Sunday school songs? Like, go way back if you attended Sunday school. We got all kinds of Sunday school songs. I don't know any songs about Barnabas. I don't know any songs about Miriam. I don't know any songs about Phoebe or Jonathan. And yet all of them have important roles to play in biblical history. And there's not the fanfare that there is for Moses, David, Peter, Paul, and Mary. Well, not that Peter, Paul, and Mary, the other Peter, Paul, and Mary. Think about Joseph. Joseph, the man who would get to raise Jesus, play a huge role in his life, and yet we're hardly told anything about him, other than the fact that one time he lost Jesus. Imagine, that's your claim to fame. I'm the guy that lost Jesus, right? And I would argue all of these individuals that have been mentioned, and maybe some of us aren't even familiar with, are these unsung heroes. They all have a significant role to play in their stories of history and how they shaped and continue to shape the lives of people around them for the sake of the kingdom. One such hero we're going to talk about today. In fact, somebody asked me, who's the first unsung hero? Who are we going to talk about, this coming Sunday? And I couldn't answer. I was like, they don't have a name. They're not even given a name in the Bible. It's an unnamed young girl whom we read about in 2 Kings chapter 5. And her role reminds us very pointedly that God uses people from all ages and backgrounds. That's actually part of our vision statement here at Welcome. People from all ages and backgrounds transformed by the gospel, engaged in community, and living on mission. Right? That's what we see in the scriptures. And from this young girl, this unsung hero, we discover some lessons, some challenging lessons and characteristics of how to make a difference in people's lives around us. 3 challenging lessons from this nameless young girl. Again, we find her story in 2 Kings chapter 5, and for some context, Aram, territory north of divided Israel, they had separated themselves from the once historic unified Israel under King David's rule, and at this point they'd become hostile to the northern kingdom. They'd become hostile to Israel, and eventually it would fall to the invading kingdom of Assyria. And yet we're told in chapter 5, verse 1, about this guy named Naaman. It tells us Naaman was a commander of the army of the king of Aram, this nation that was hostile, or this group of people that was hostile towards Israel. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. He had a skin disease, which was very difficult to deal with in those days, and likely would claim his life. And it says, bands of raiders from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." And so Naaman went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. And his master said, "By all means, go. Right? I will send a letter to the king of Israel." And so Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. And the letter that he took to the king of Israel read, "With this letter I am sending you my servant Naaman to you so that you may cure him of his leprosy." And while that certainly raises questions like, why would God grant victory to Aram over Israel? Our focus today is not so much on that subject as it is on the faith of this nameless young girl. Because when she sees her master's suffering, when she sees his need and his pain and discomfort and everything that's going on, she speaks up. She acts. She doesn't just believe or acknowledge that the man of God can heal her master. She doesn't just know it. It's not just knowledge, but she acts upon that belief to the point of speaking up to her mistress about what God can do and wants to do through this prophet. She's so confident, she cannot stay silent. And in this way, my friends, she really challenges us and shows us the character that makes an everyday, ordinary person a hero. An unsung hero. When we have faith that leads us to action. The young girl had faith in God. She believed what God could and would do and acted upon it. Even though her master and mistress were Assyrian or allied with Assyria, enemies of Israel, she still had a readiness to share her faith. She still believed in what God could do and what he wanted to do. And friends, that's what faith does. It leads us to action. This is what faith is. It's belief to the point of acting. As a young man, I go back and I remember I was sitting in a gathering one time. I can't even remember if it was a Sunday morning or not, but I was sitting in a gathering in a congregation of I don't know how many, but it just seems like the room was packed out. There was a balcony and everything, and this speaker got up, and he came in front of everybody, and he began sharing, I have some money, and he pulled out his wallet, and I can't remember how much money it was, but he said, I have $1 or $5 or $10 for the first person that comes up front and will take this from me. And I remember sitting right there. I'm in the front. I'm on the third row. I'm on an aisle, and I'm just stunned by the statement that he makes. Is it true? Really? He's just going to give away money? What kind of person does that, right? I couldn't believe he was just going to give it away. To me, that was just ridiculous. Who does that? And before I can move, I remember there was a guy that like seemed to come down all the way from the balcony. He's like the only one, and it's taken him some time, and everybody's just watching him. And he comes down. He's got kind of a goofy gape or run, and he gets up there to the front, and he takes the money, and everybody's just sitting there staring at him. And the guy gives him the money, and we're all like in disbelief. And he turns around and he waves the money like, look what I got, look what I got. He takes 2 steps and then he trips. And that's why I can't remember how much money it was. Because I remember he tripped. Like he looked like a fool in front of everybody. Right? Because everyone else was so afraid to get out of their comfort zone. Right? Everyone else was so afraid to stand up in front of the crowd. Like, what if he doesn't give us the money? What if it's just an illustration or a joke and we get up there and he's like, nah, just kidding. Or, after the service is over, he comes up and finds us and he's like, so that was just for the illustration? Can you, nobody believed that he was going to do what he actually did. Except for this gawky young man who can't apparently walk, who went up to the front. And he received the money because he believed the invitation. That invitation drove him to action, just like this young unnamed girl that we're reading about. She believed that God had the power and the authority and wanted good for her master so much that she had to act. She had to speak up. She had to say something. She couldn't just go on with her ordinary, everyday chores without letting it be known. And we'll see how that turned out in a minute, but the challenge there for us is so clear. Do we have a faith in God? A faith that drives us to action like we're seeing here? Do we have that? Not just simply a faith that acknowledges God and says, well, I believe in the existence of Him out of maybe a necessity or desire for some higher power or maybe, but really that recognizes Him as, the creator and sustainer of all things, who always was and always will be, and of whom sent His Son, Jesus, to dwell with us and die for us as a payment for our sins so that we could enter into right relationship with Him and be made right with the Father and live with Him forever and now participate in this plan or story of the redemption of the world. Or do we really believe that? Because that's the best news ever. Right? Do we give ourselves to that? Does that drive our speech and our actions? Does it drive our minds and the way we think and look and view things? Because how we think shapes our behavior. It shapes our actions. This young nameless girl demonstrated that for us. Demonstrated that reality, and we can and must take it to heart because of what we see at the end of the story. I was reading a book this week, Christ Among the Dragons, really cool title. And the author of that book talks about how back in ancient days they used to put dragons at the corners and the ends of maps, areas that were unexplored. And they're like, we don't know what's going on here. There be dragons. Like, be careful how you navigate beyond this particular point. And he goes on to explain in the book some of the dragons in our day and the challenges that we face in learning how to navigate them. But in the book, he talks about one of the primary things that has helped his church really grow and flourish and make a difference in their community is they really believe that the message of Jesus is the best news ever. It's not something just to be hung on to, but the people in the church actively go out and share that message. When it becomes more than academic and knowledge-based, that's when we really see God begin to work. When it becomes more than just something that helps us get on in our week, more than just therapeutic, that's when the difference is made. It's like what we read in James 2:14, where the scriptures say, what good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but no deeds? Can such a faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but then does nothing about their physical needs, what good is that? In the same way, faith by itself, if not accompanied by action, is dead. And that's the challenge. That's what this nameless young girl does. It's the example she sets. I believe so much that I'm going to take action. Do we have that kind of faith? And then notice with me, if you will, the state she's in. Right? This is the second thing we see about her that kind of exemplifies a hero or an unsung hero. She's a servant. She's a slave. She doesn't have autonomy, but is in forced servitude. And yet, as such, it doesn't appear that she's serving and carrying out her chores begrudgingly. In fact, the evidence or implication is that she expresses compassion for her master, for the person who stole her away from her family. So bad that she wants to change the environment that she's in, the household that she's in, the work environment she's in, by seeking his well-being. For his well-being, I'm sure, not only affected like him, but it affected those who served under him, affected his family. Which kind of alludes to the character of this unsung hero, this nameless girl, that she is doing her best even in undesirable circumstances. She's trying to make the most of it, even if she doesn't get the recognition. The young girl did her best in her humble state. And I don't know about you, but I look around at the culture we live in, the world we live in, our day and age, and it's easy to look at others and think, well, why can't it be that way for me? Why does their life seem to be so easy? Why does it seem that they always catch the breaks? Why does it seem that they're always getting more and it goes well for them and they never have anything bad happen to them? That's the world we live in. That's what this young girl could have been asking. I don't understand why I'm a servant. I don't understand why I was taken from my family. We don't read about her complaining about the way things are. We don't read that. That's not what we read of her. Rather, she seems to be working diligently, doing the best she can in her place, diligently, with concern, whether she's noticed or not. And that lines up with a lot of what the apostle missionary Paul taught in the early church. In the letter to the Colossian church, he wrote to Christian households, which often included slaves because that was, part of the working culture of that day. It was more of a caste system. And he writes, slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything. And do it not only when their eye is on you and to curry their favor, but with sincerity of heart and reverence for the Lord. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. Now today we might use the words employee or employees here, whether treated fairly, rightly, justly, or unfairly. The challenge we see this young girl encouraging us toward is being a person of integrity, being a person of trust, whether in good circumstances or poor, whether you like your job or you don't, set an example. Because how you respond in your poor circumstances is an opportunity to point others to Jesus. Is an opportunity to give him glory, can point others to the Father who will reward us when we are faithful. I find it interesting, this unnamed girl was setting that example before the Apostle Paul ever wrote this letter of encouragement to the Colossian church. Before he was ever carried by the Holy Spirit to write these words, to pen these words, she was living it out. And we don't even know her name. She did her best in her humble state. And as we read on in the story, we discover the king of Israel. This is interesting. He receives the letter that the king of Aram had written, and as soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tears his robes, he tears his clothes, and says, am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy? See how he's trying to pick a quarrel of me? Because the king can't do it. The king can't fix the situation. He's not able to heal Naaman. But Elisha, the man of God, he hears that the king of Israel has torn his robes, and he sends this message. Why have you torn your robes? Send them to me. Have him come to me. And he will know there is a prophet in Israel. There's a God in Israel. And so Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. And Elisha sent a messenger out to say to him, go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored to you, and be clean. And Naaman didn't like it. He was upset. He was angry. Don't you know who I am? I'm the commander of the armies of Aram. Right? I'm the king's servant. He sent me to you, and you send me a servant? You don't even bother to show up? On top of that, he's like told to wash in the Jordan. He's like, that's dirty. The rivers in Damascus are way cleaner than that. In fact, what he really wanted is captured in verse 11. What he really wanted was to just pay Elisha and kind of have him wave his hand over him. Be like, be cured, right? Almost like those magicians do with the little claws that they hang over stuff and like hang, right? That's what he wanted. He wanted Elisha to just be like, all better, right? That's what he wanted. He wanted to humble himself, and he wanted to talk to who was in charge. He didn't want to wash in this nasty river. He was the commander of the army of the king of Aram. And yet we find in the following verses that Naaman didn't find healing. He couldn't find healing until he was willing to humble himself. Even with all his money, his thousands of shekels and clothing and everything else, he couldn't buy his healing. He could only humble himself and receive it. And when he did, when he humbled himself before God, the text says all of his attendants went back to the man of God, stood before him, and said, now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel. And so please accept this gift from your servant. The prophet answered, as surely as the Lord lives whom I serve, I will not accept a thing. And even though Naaman urged him, he refused, because again, the money, the status, the power, the to-do cannot buy God. God doesn't bow to our whims or operate according to how we think he should operate. No, more often than not, like the unnamed young servant girl, and like Naaman, he responds to our humility, our willingness to trust and be obedient no matter the circumstances that we find ourselves in, and do our best for him. And that's so key in pointing other people to Jesus, my friends. It's characteristic of our unsung heroes that our humility, often in service, points people to Jesus. Doing the best we can wherever we're at with whatever we have, even though it may not be where we want to be. Even though life hasn't turned out the way we had hoped it would turn out. Because we know that when we're humble and we offer ourselves to God and our services to him and whatever we have, that he's faithful. And he'll use our circumstances for his glory. And so the question is, how's it going? Are we keeping our humility in check? Are we keeping our attitudes in check, faithfully serving others? Are we faithfully serving Christ and his church, even though maybe things haven't played out for us exactly the way we had hoped? I deserve this. I would help, but sometimes we feel like God owes us something, or we feel like, I can't serve, I can't help until my circumstances get better. That's not what we see here in the text. And then I'll get on board. That'll be more in line with what you want me to do, but first we got to take care of me. No. Are we faithfully serving Christ and His church, even though things haven't exactly played out the way we maybe have wanted them to? Even though maybe others get accolades or recognition or seem to be the ones in the spotlight, are we continuing to be faithful? Because here's the reality. God sees you. Even if you don't feel like you can offer anything, even if you don't feel like you have something to contribute, God sees you. God has a role for you, and your role matters. It doesn't go unnoticed. And the real heroes aren't always the one whose names are spoken of in the crowds, or who are seen preaching from the podiums, or given the attention, but simply those who are faithfully and humbly serving so that others may know the one true God, just like we see with this nameless young girl. And so we see how God uses her, how He can potentially use us who might also find ourselves in humble circumstances, or who might also feel nameless and unrecognized, small with not much to contribute. But there's another piece that we got to see here, we got to get to, that has to do with where she came from and where she's at. We touched on it briefly in the first point, but she was taken from her family. I don't know if you caught that. Bands of raiders took her from her family. That's what verse 2 tells us. A band of raiders from Aram had gone out and taken captive the young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. Now, it doesn't say what happened to her parents. Were they killed? Were they murdered? Were they injured? Or was this young girl just simply kidnapped? We don't know. We can only imagine. And yet, as we look at the clues from her response to Naaman's suffering, it seems to hint at her countenance and her attitude, her posture. It seems that she didn't serve with or go through her circumstances harboring ill will. Like, I can't wait till they get what they deserve. What goes around comes around. You know, it doesn't seem like that's her attitude in all of this. We don't see her casting blame. We don't see her seeking vengeance or arguably even justice. But while there, she has this attitude of, how can I better my environment? How can I serve my master well? How can I be a blessing to those around me? It seems she's got compassion on the very ones who had mistreated her life. She loved her enemies. You want to talk about a hard teaching? There you go. And what's crazy is this is all before Jesus. Before Jesus shows up on the scene, who would teach His disciples the same thing in Matthew 5:43. Right? You've heard it was said, love your neighbor, hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? In the Bible, those were the bad guys, right? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that. Again, in the Bible, they're often depicted as the bad guys. Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. And that word perfect at the end there is not so much about being without error as it is speaking of wholeness. As Jesus' followers, we are supposed to be seeking wholeness in our own lives and in the lives of the people around us, in the communities in which we live. Completeness. For the sun and the rain in the text are viewed as blessings from God. They're common grace given to all. Both are required for things to flourish, and God wants all people, both us and those we may consider our enemies, those who maybe hold a different view or ideology or even religious perspective than what we do. He wants all people, both good and bad, to experience His love and goodness, to be made complete in Him. Thus, the young girl's compassion on Naaman, right? She wants wholeness for him. And as such, many people, because of her faithfulness, many people get to hear about and witness the power of God. Their lives are transformed. Author theologian William Perkiser puts it like this: God's healing power manifest in the cure of Naaman's leprosy was intended to show further that the God of Israel was greater than the gods of the Syrians. The miracle was for the benefit, listen to this, the miracle was for the benefit of the Israelites as well as the Assyrians. It wasn't meant to say, ha, look at us, we're better than you. It was meant to lead the Syrians to the Father, to the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. The Israelites understood that God intended them to be His instrument to win other peoples to Himself. And what I love about this account is it reminds us that in a world where we're so quick to divide into groups, and this group and that group, and us and them, and make enemies of other people because they think and believe and maybe act differently, and enemies of the state, enemies of the church, enemies of God, we are reminded that God is for all of us. He wants wholeness for all of us. He wants to draw all peoples to Himself, so much that He would send His Son to die on a cross. I got news. Jesus didn't just die for the good people. In fact, Scripture actually says no one is good. He died for the good, the bad, the ugly. And we get to participate in that plan of the redemption of the world when we too seek perfection, seek wholeness of our world by loving our enemies and wanting the best for those who may find ourselves at odds with, in disagreement with. I mean, what would happen if we stopped being so concerned with what others deserved in our lives and instead sought their well-being? What if we spoke well of others instead of harshly or negatively? What if we modeled this young, unnamed girl, this unsung hero? Because I tend to think, like she did, we would also see a mighty move of God, like we never imagined. I tend to think our buildings wouldn't be sufficient for the crowds that would gather. Again, this isn't fluff. This isn't an easy teaching. But it's the characteristics of heroes. And so as we close, I want to draw attention to these characteristics one more time. What do we see here? What do we observe of this person who doesn't even get a name mentioned in the Scripture? She believes and exercises faith to the point of action.